want to talk about some of the structural elements and then some of the theological ideas. I normally did that for you in the gospel. So here's some structural, what to look for. Remember, Mark has the windows and Matthew has the 5 speeches. So I want to talk about structure. Then I want to talk about theology. That is, what themes does John really emphasize and want his readers to grasp? So, as far as structure, the clearest, if you look at John's gospel, the clearest thing to notice is that there's a prologue, chapter 1, with this big long poem, and an epilogue, that extra chapter 21. And beyond that, the book is divided into 2 halves. The first half scholars call the book of signs. It goes from chapter 1, verse 19 through chapter 12, verse 50. Because the backbone of it is 7 mighty works of Jesus. Now, Jesus doesn't call them mighty works, nor does he call them the words that you would like to use, miracles. The word never appears. The word that appears is sign. That's not an accident. Now, I'm not saying it's not a miracle or not a mighty work, but you miss John's point. It's a sign. What does a sign do? It points to something not right here. If we had a sign on the wall that said washroom or bathrooms that way, you wouldn't do your number right below the sign, would you? You would follow the arrow, I would hope, to the appropriate room. When you're on the highway and he says Madison 120, you don't say, oh, we're at Madison. No. Even when you get to the line, Madison, 220,000, that's just the beginning of Madison. So a sign points to something beyond itself. The 7 mighty works point to things about Jesus. Okay? They're about Jesus. They are. The signs are the wedding at Cana. Chapter 2. The healing of the nobleman's son. Late chapter 4. The healing at the pool of Bethesda. That's chapter 5. Feeding the multitude, that's early chapter 6, that's loaves and fish. Walking on the water, that's middle chapter 6. Healing the man born blind, chapter 9. Raising of Lazarus, chapter 11. Those are the 7 signs that are most of the book, most of this half of the book has to do with Jesus does something like this, and then there's a discussion. Or there's some kind of, argument about what does it mean, okay? But the signs are all revealing something about who Jesus is. So don't stop at the mighty work. No, it's meant to open the door for you to see something about Jesus. It points to something about Jesus' identity. The book of glory is the second major section, from chapter 13, verse 1, through chapter 19, verse 42. So it embraces the passion story as well. Glory. Glory is a term that you'll see a lot in John's gospel and the letters. I've spoken about glory before because the term is an Old Testament term. If you're lucky enough to see a full eclipse of the sun, when the moon passes in front of the sun, and then you get the corona, the shining light around the outside, that's the glory. Glory is is the shining around something that is too brilliant to take in. Okay, that's the glory. So glory is a effervescence, a fluorescence that stands around something that is beyond our idea. So that's why saints, a little halo-y, that's a that's a little sample of glory. Okay? Can you see mine? How about if I am on this light? Now you can see it because it bounces off with the hair is thin. All right. So the book of glory this is where, if the signs are pointing, the second half is when Jesus really opens the doors and says, here, this is what God looks like. Want to know what God looks like? The signs hinted at it, but now you see it. What's this, and what is the work that reveals God? Jesus' death. Jesus' death is what reveals who God is. All right? On the handout, the salmon-colored handout, yours might be a little bit different color, are just listed a whole bunch of literary characteristics. And I already mentioned the first one. So there are the chapters and verses for the 7 signs. Here are other things that are typical of John's literary writing. First, misunderstanding that when Jesus says something, people don't understand him. So last Sunday, we read John 2. Jesus cleanses the temple, and he says to the authorities, tear down this temple, and I will rebuild it in 3 days. And they go, well, that's preposterous. This took 46 years. And then the narrator says, he was speaking of the temple of his body. See, that's one example of, well, I give you like 6 or 8, where Jesus says something and it goes whoosh. Because they're down here and he's up here. Okay? Number 3, irony. People say more than they know. Okay? The example, the premier example is chapter 11, verses 48 to 50. Look it up, just mark it, look it up later. This is when, after Lazarus has been raised, the chief priest gathers his henchmen, and they talk about doing Jesus in, and the high priest says, it's right that one man dies for the nation. Now, what he means is, if we don't eliminate Jesus, the Romans are going to come down on us. Okay? In fact, John says the chief priest was a prophet because he said, what he said was true, but not at the level he meant it. He meant it politically. It's right that we get rid of one man to save the nation. But what does John mean is by that Jesus' death saves the world. You see? So the high priest, who was no lover of Jesus, says it's right that one man die for the nation. He means it down here. But John says absolutely. He knew he was a prophet, was the high priest. And he said things he didn't even understand. Okay? Irony. Irony is when again, it's kind of related to this misunderstanding. Again, that people. I'm sorry, I just used that example. That's number 4. Replacement. I gave you that scenario that scholars proposed that Jews after 70 tightened the admission standards in the synagogue, and many Jews who had come to know Jesus were thrown out of the synagogue, and they weren't welcome, and that led to Jewish Christians thinking about Jesus as a replacement, that Jesus is the replacement for Judaism. So he is the temple. What's the temple? The temple is the place where God agreed to meet us in our sinfulness. Well, we meet God in our sinfulness in Jesus. Jesus is the replacement of the ceremonial washings in a mikvah. That's going to explain the way to Cana. It's not, Jesus is the party animal. He loves wine. No. Jesus is replacing, it'll come to you, go, oh my gosh, I never knew that before. Stuff you already know. The water was poured into stone vessels that were used for what? Ceremonial washings. And Jesus transforms the water used for ceremonial washings into wine. He is bringing something far better than that. Okay? into the chosen people, not by circumcision and ethnicity, but by baptism. Jesus will discuss with the woman at the well how worship in Jerusalem and Samaria is going to be trumped by worship in spirit and truth. In chapter 5, Jesus heals a man on a Sabbath because Jesus is the replacement of what the Sabbath stands for. Jesus feeds a crowd like Moses fed a crowd, but he's better than that. Jesus talks about himself being living water, like Moses brought water from the rocks. Jesus dedicates himself, consecrates himself as the new temple. And there's a reference to Jesus. So Jesus is going to, you'll see references to every major Jewish holiday, every Jewish institution, most of the patriarchs. Abraham, Moses, fourth chapter, he's with the woman in Samaria, and she says, surely you don't think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who dug this well. Well, what's the answer? Well, yeah, matter of fact, I am. Okay? So the idea of replacement, Jesus as the replacement for the Jewish institution, Jewish calendar, Jewish story. Double meanings. Again, he says, I'm from above, you're from below. So when I say something here, you hear it down here. Inclusion, that means that sometimes there'll be references back, I mean, like parentheses. There'll be occasions where the author references back to something. He's not doing the mark and window thing exactly, but he's drawing a conclusion to a section. That's number 6. Number 7, realized eschatology. In our reading of Mark and Luke, but more Mark, and surely Paul, we are waiting for Jesus' return. Remember 1 Thessalonians? Jesus, like a trumpet sound, like an earthquake, and then Jesus is going to call the dead, and they're going to return to meet Jesus in the air, and we're going to gather. That's, how is the world going to be judged? In the dominant vision that we know is future eschatology, at the end of time. There's a little bit of that in John's Gospel, but the dominant vision of eschatology is realized. That is, when you meet Jesus, you're meeting Judgment Day. That is, the point is not how are you going to live your life, it's what do you think about Jesus. If you see him as divine, you're being saved, even as you say that. If you reject him, if you think he's a fraud, you're being condemned. He says, I don't condemn anybody. You condemn yourselves. My story for this is, imagine if we had a bunch of precious, priceless art pieces. Let's say Rembrandts, like 25 Rembrandts from the Rembrandt Museum in Amsterdam, here at St. Michael's, and we hang them on the walls, and folks would come in and look at them. We have a guard here, and imagine a guy comes in and looks at them and goes, well, he goes to the guard, these aren't all that impressive, they're not all that much. The guard says, sir, the pictures, the portraits are not on trial here. Your taste is on trial. Get it? Huh? Are you sharp enough to recognize the art and the beauty of Rembrandt? You are on trial. That's the scene in John's Gospel. People are always, you think Jesus is on trial? Everybody Jesus encounters, they're on trial. You'll see that if you go to Good Friday service, or read your homework for next time, the trial of Jesus. That's the whole deal with Pilate. Pilate doesn't even recognize what is truth. Truth is standing in front of him. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That's chapter 14. So Pilate says, what is truth? Well, Pilate is blind. Pilate's on trial, and he flunks in the end. Okay? So watch for that. This is all unique stuff to John's gospel. Duplicate speeches. Again, I already said that the text kind of sometimes seems out of order, and that is it intentional, is it accidental? I don't know. But if you think, gosh, didn't we hear this before? Yes, often you did hear it before. Because little passages get repeated more than once. Those are all literary, okay? Now let me talk about some theological ideas. I've already kind of laid this on you, but, and then our reading will go quite fast because I'm not going to have to tear into each one. First, Christology. How does John view Jesus? Compare again, how did Mark view Jesus? He was the Christ. He was the Son of God. But there are many sons of God, huh? Jesus' title for himself was Son of Man, okay? So that was Mark's view. What was Luke's view of Jesus? I don't expect you to get this pretty light. Savior. Jesus is the Savior. Okay, he hangs out with women and Samaritans and tax collectors, and he brings salvation. But in John's gospel, Jesus does what God does. Okay? The Son carries the full authority of the Father. The Father and the Son, Jesus will famously say, are one. And yet they're individual. And he'll also say, so on the one hand, John will have Jesus say over and over again how much he and the Father are identical, and yet they're not quite identical. He will, in chapter 5, we'll see that, the language that he uses. Or the fact that the Son prays to the Father, which seems odd to us if they're identical. So we're not saying they're identical, but that in John's gospel, Jesus does what the Father does. Right? And one of the ways that the chief way that this is revealed in John's gospel is by a series of I am sayings. You remember when Moses comes to the burning bush and he says, "Who should I say sent me?" What does the voice from the bush say? I am who I am. And in Greek, it's ego, eimi. I am. Well, Jesus is frequently going to say, I am. When you read for next time, in the garden, when the troops come to arrest Jesus, he asks, who are you looking for? And they say, Jesus the Nazarene, all together, all 220 of them. Jesus the Nazarene. And he says, I am. And they all fall down. Now, if you've never noticed that before, I forgive you. But if you've noticed it and weren't puzzled by it, why are they all falling down? My scholars of the Bible that you have become, why do they fall down? Because Jesus has just identified, who is he? Yahweh, I am Yahweh. It's not because they believe in him, but they can't help themselves. So Jesus will say, I am the bread of life. Chapter 6. I am the light of the world. Chapter 8. I am the door. Chapter 10. I am the vine. 15. I am the good shepherd. That's 10 again. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Okay? So watch. Now, sometimes in your translation, it may say, I am, it might add the word he. I am he. That's good English, huh? I am he. But he's not there. It's just ego, I me. I am. I am. Okay? Number 2. Dualism. By which I mean opposites. There's symbolic opposites. Light and dark. Life and death. There's no in-between. There's no gray in John's gospel. Either you love him or you hate him. everything is just, now again, we live in a culture that's reeling from polarization. Well, John's gospel was written for America in 2020. Everything is there or there. There's nothing in between. There's no gray. Okay? So, deal with it. I guess I've mentioned these already. The signs, I've mentioned that. Huh? So, seeing signs. When the gospel says somebody saw signs, that's not good news. Okay? That means that they're looking only at the surface. So Jesus will dismiss people. You're only here, the crowd that he fed, chapter 6. You're here because you were fed. You've only seen the signs. You didn't grasp what's really going on. What's really going on there? Jesus is the true food. I mean, yes, he fed you, but you're going to be hungry again. But I am the living bread. If you nourish yourself on me, you will never hunger. Now, Jesus is not talking about we can skip lunch today. But he's talking about his true identity. The bread, the multiplication of the loaves, was a pointer to Jesus as the true nourishing food. So he kind of mocks the crowd because they're just there because they're hungry. You are here because you saw the signs, not because you believe. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4, the replacement motif. I went through that already. Jesus replaces institutions like the Sabbath, like the Passover, like the temple, and personages like Jacob, like Moses, like Abraham. Salvation, number 5. Jesus is the means of salvation. I already intimated that. You know, you are being judged when you stand before Jesus. Watch for all the language about judgment, testimony, witness. Look for the words testimony, witness, judgment. They're all over the place. Because for John's gospel, how you accept or reject Jesus reveals who you are. You are judging yourself. Okay? And my last item, the role of the beloved disciple. He's always doing better than Peter. Now, Peter is kind of a hero. I mean, at least he's the head of the game, huh? In Mark and in Luke. Well, the beloved disciple, every time he appears, the evangelist makes the point that he's closer to Jesus. I mean, at the Last Supper, he's hanging on Jesus' chest, huh? And Simon has a gesture to find out what he meant by that. He's the one who lets Peter into the chief priest's courtyard because he knows the chief priest. Peter would never have been there without the beloved disciple. Peter isn't at the cross when Jesus dies. Who's at the cross? The beloved disciple. Easter morning, Mary Magdalene says, the tomb is empty. Beloved disciple and Peter hoof it out there. Who gets there first? Beloved disciple. And Peter sees it, and he's kind of mystified. But then the narrator says, but beloved disciple saw and believed. So you get the sense that in the gospel, the beloved disciple is one notch over Peter. Always. Now, the beloved disciple doesn't begin in the text, doesn't surface until the Last Supper. So you'll look for him in vain in the book of signs, but he dominates. He's the number 1 in the book of glory. Whew. Now, okay, your ears are already dripping blood from everything I've dumped on you. That's what the masks are for, yes. So we're going to keep going. I mean, you might have questions, but we got to start doing some reading, and we're going to hip and skip and jump because it's a very long book, huh? But what I've given you here is kind of like I've taken John's gospel and I've run it out. So all the meat is in the plate. Now let's look at the text. And again, John is unlike, he is so different. Think about the symbols for the evangelists. You know, 2nd century Christians began to associate, there are the 4 living creatures. You haven't met them yet in Revelation, and they're in Ezekiel. But the tradition associated these 4 creatures with the 4 evangelists. And what's the creature that's associated with John? The eagle. Because he soars over the others. A very different view. Okay? All right. Here goes. Let's see if we can do another 20 minutes. And we'll take a break. So it begins with a prologue. That's remarkable. And it's poetry. You know, when I was in grade school, or even maybe middle school, high school, I was taught when you write a little paper or an essay, you write the opening paragraph last. I never did that, but that's what they told me to do. Okay? How are you too? They told you to write your essay and then write the first paragraph. You didn't do it either. You just wrote it and be done with it. But in some ways, this poem serves as that. I mean, it makes sense to read it after you've studied the whole book, because then it leaps out at you. But let's do a little reading now. In the beginning, hot reference to Genesis, was the Word. Now let's stop and look at that. The word in Greek is logos. Okay? And logos means many things. It means reason and knowledge. And, you know, when I speak, the stuff that's in me, my rationality, my emotion, I articulate through a word. And if you let the word in, then it's in you. Huh? So there's that, the concept of wisdom as word that is conveyed predates John's gospel. We'll see it when we read wisdom literature in the Old Testament. But what the prologue is saying is that Jesus, the Son, is God's best self-expression. He's God's. So you want to know what's on my mind? Let me tell you, we say, huh? So when we say Christ is the Word, the capital W, we mean he is God's self-revelation to us. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Duality, light, darkness. Huh? He came to bring light. He shone in the darkness. Verses 6, 7, and 8 we're stuck in later. It's about John the Baptist. We're not going to read them. Go to verse 9. The true light. In fact, the text reads just fine, omitting verses 6, 7, and 8. Though you do see in verse 7 references to testimony and witness. Remember I told you, it's constant rhetoric about a judgment scene. Verse 9. The true light that enlightens every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. Okay, world. Okay, we are a generation that's finally coming around to see the world organically. You know, we love creation. We love the environment. In John's gospel, the world rarely means the environment. Often it means the stage on which things take place. Most of the time, world is a symbol for all that's wrong. The word is cosmos. Most of the time, so on the one hand, Jesus says, God so loved the world. Okay, that's the space in which we live. But later on, he will say, you know, the world wants to destroy you. So got to be careful because he uses the same word with different tones. But in this verse I just read, the world knew him not. Well, the apostles knew him, and there were those who did. So the world is the bad guys, the enemies, those who try to live apart from God in John's gospel. Verse 12. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And here's the most important verse for many of us. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So this divine wisdom and knowledge that always existed, that was there at creation, came to earth and took on flesh. The word dwelt, and any preacher will probably know this, the word dwelt literally means to encamp, to build a tent. Skena is a tent. So God tents with us, which means he's only here for a while. He's not building a hotel. He's just here momentarily. Full of grace and truth, we have beheld his glory as of the only Son. Again, there's a little John the Baptist line. Skip over that. And from his fullness have we all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Next year, we're going to read the prophets, and I'm going to teach you some Hebrew words. Grace is chesed, loving kindness, chesed. And truth is emeth, like amen. These are big concepts. Graciousness, God's free gifts, and his truthfulness came through Jesus Christ. And verse 18, oh my gosh, recognize it. No one has ever seen God and live. Remember that? How many times did I drill that to you? But look at how John uses it. No one has ever seen God, but the only Son, who was in the bosom of the Father, he has made him known. So that line that I kept hammering on you in the Old Testament, John takes away and says, you have seen God, and you are alive. Okay? We read this on Christmas morning. It talks about Jesus as the co-eternal Son who has taken on flesh and dwelt, encamped among us, revealing God's grace and truth. Now, I'm not saying this is a Christmas story, but it takes, on Christmas Eve, we read the Luke story, with the shepherds and the angel singing. But this is far more than this. That's pretty Old Testament. Shepherds, angels, behold. But this is way beyond that. That the Son of God, that the Christ was with the Father from before time. Okay. Verse 19 begins the text. And look at the first word. This is the testimony of John. This language, by the way, is called forensic. Language about judgment. So words like witness and testimony. Just keep track of how many times they appear. Because if Jesus is God and he walks in the room and we don't fall down, we're being judged. Our lack of sight, our inability to grasp. John the Baptist points out Jesus to his disciples who do nothing about it. But John gives witness. He calls Jesus the Lamb of God. Now, lambs in the Bible are associated with sacrifice. This is God's sacrifice come among us. Verse 29, well, back up, Mark. There's no story of Jesus' baptism in John. What happens is John relates what happened at the baptism. I think I told you beginning of this year, the evangelists after Mark are troubled what to do with the baptism because it suggests that Jesus was a sinner because the baptism was for sinners. Luke handled it, remember, by putting it in a subordinate clause. After Jesus was baptized, then this happened. Here, it's handled because there's no narration, there's no you're there. Instead, John the Baptist, part of his testimony, he says, I didn't know it was him. And then I recognized him and when the Holy Spirit spoke over him. Okay? Verse 29, the next day, the Baptist is there again. And again he points out to his disciples, to John's disciples, Jesus. And again says, behold the Lamb of God. And here comes an exquisitely written little scene. John, if you take Greek, the first part of the New Testament they'll have you read is the first letter of John. And the second thing they'll have you read is the Gospel of John. Because it's like monosyllables. It's all like, But from these very simple words, he builds this masterful theology. So there's always more going on in John than meets the eye. So the first time the Baptist points to Jesus, what happens? Nothing. Which is exactly like it is with us. Think of the people who tried to introduce you to Christ. And you were like, playing on my phone, I'm picking my nose. The Baptist points again, and this time they begin to follow. Just begin to follow. And Jesus turns around. He senses them. And he asks a question. What are you looking for? Now, at one level, that's just like an ordinary question. But it's a deep question. What are you really looking for, deacon? I mean, really. What are you hungry for? What at the deepest nature, what are you missing at the core of who you are? What are you hungry? What are you looking for? Okay, profound question. And they answer well. They don't say, give me money or give me a quick way to heaven. They ask, where do you dwell? They don't want a solution. They want communion. Tell me where you live so I can dwell with you. And he doesn't say 611 Stark Street or under the bridge. He says, come and see. You're only going to know me by following in my company. See, it's a beautiful story. It's not just stupid questions. It's about coming to faith. How we don't recognize when people point Christ out to us. When if we even begin a little bit to follow him, he will turn to us. We don't got to track him down. If we even make a little nudge, he'll turn to us with his question. What do you want me to do for you? I hope you have a good answer. Don't say, I want my stocks to go up. I want my children to be well behaved. I want to have a house up north. No. Bad answers. Where do you dwell? I want to dwell with you. And be ready, he says, come and see. It's your whole life going to cost you. The narrator says they stayed with him that whole day. And that it was, and they remark on the time of day. Look at 29, 39? 39. They stayed with him that day. It was about the 10th hour. That's 4 o'clock. Now, there's hardly any references to time in the gospel. Why this? Because this is a significant moment. It's like when you met your spouse. Well, maybe not, but when you met the woman you love. I remember that. You know, it was geography class, or it was on the bus to basketball game. It was. Remember those things, huh? Okay. So there's always more going on. This is where Jesus begins to collect disciples. Okay, because one of the two who was with John the Baptist, verse 40. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew. Okay, Andrew alone. And Andrew goes to Simon and says, we have found the Messiah. And they bring him to Jesus. And right out of the gate, Jesus says, Simon, I'm going to call you Rock. Without any explanation. Okay? Or Cephas, Rock. You see bits and pieces of what you're familiar with from the synoptics, but totally in a different context. Huh? But we're not done. He's still assembling disciples. Then Philip, let's see. Jesus comes up to Philip and says, follow me. And Philip does. Okay. Then Philip goes to Nathanael and says in verse 45, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote, Jesus the Nazareth, the son of Joseph. This is the famous sign of Nazareth. He says, what good can come from Nazareth? But then Jesus wows Nathanael by saying, I saw you under the tree, which suggests that Jesus has an awareness of all things, that Nathanael will recognize, well, yeah, I was under a tree. This man sees things. So Nathanael responds, look at verse 49. Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You shall see greater things than these. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Now you remember in Mark's gospel how Jesus always shut down people who guessed who he was? Not in John. In fact, we get title upon title upon title. What's the first thing that they call Jesus? What's the first title? Look back over that. I just pushed you through that whole series. Son of God. Verse 34. Son of God. What's the next title? Well, first they call him Rabbi, I guess. Rabbi comes first, somewhere. Son of God. Then what's next? Then comes Rabbi, okay, which means teacher. What's the next title? Messiah, verse 41. What's the next title? Nathanael, 49. Son of God, which has already been said. King of Israel, Messiah. So, bam, 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 bam. Everybody has a title for Jesus. But Jesus says, you haven't seen anything, because what do you have in me? You will see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. What Old Testament figure is that? Jacob's ladder. We are climbing, which is what? It's the way to heaven. It's the gateway to heaven. Jesus is saying, I am the way to God. Up and down. Me. So, again, your head, you should be swimming. How different this is than the Synoptics. I love the Synoptics. I love John. But I'm a little scared of people who just read John without the Synoptics. Okay? Because it's like, woo! It's like a real mind trip. Huh? But see, do you get what's going on? How different this is? The whole gospel is going to be about Jesus' identity. And in the very first chapter, I mean, it was painful in Mark's gospel to find out who Jesus was. It's this man at the cross, you know, the centurion, who finally says, I see, this is the Son of God. In John's gospel, just the titles count. Questions? Yes, back there. Okay, the question is, why are we dealing with John now and not waiting till the end and use Matthew? Get all the synoptics out of the way, so to speak. Actually, in the minds of the pedagogues who worked on this, they realized that not all of you will be here in year 4. You're not all here in year 2. I mean, maybe you didn't notice, but we lost about 10 people last year. And for lots of reasons. I mean, some of it health or issues with their kids, or, oh my God, there's homework. I mean, I know you knew there's homework, but you didn't really know there was homework. And so they kind of preload the class so that if you just survive 2 years, you've dealt with the Old Testament history, which is really important, and you've dealt with the most important parts. You've had samples of Gospel, Acts, Paul, and John. I mean, you've tasted of all the major streams of New Testament work. Oh, Revelation. Okay, so it just they recognize that in 2 years you'll get a good beginning if you're not womanly enough to stay with us for 4 years.
But don't quit. It gets better.
I think it's darn good right now. Thank you. Peter?
Are these some of the reasons why John's so important to Protestantism?
Yes. A great question. I'll run ahead. Oh, thank you. You may, if you listen to TV preachers, or if you go to a non-denominational church, you will rarely hear Matthew's gospel or Mark's gospel or Luke's gospel. You will hear St. Paul and John over and over and over and over again. Why? Well, because because they have a strong evangelical drive to spread the news of Jesus' identity. And John and Paul cut to the chase. But the downside is, remember I told you John is dualistic, black and white. That's why if you believe in Jesus, you go to heaven. If you don't go to Jesus, you're going to hell. It's very easy. Not easy, but it's you see where that comes from. It comes from this. It comes from their emphasis. In John's gospel, Jesus does not tell us to pray for our enemies. Never. He does not tell us to love our enemies. That's synoptics. That's actually Matthew and Luke. In John's gospel, it's all about Jesus and your connection to Jesus, and the rest of the world. The best thing you can do for them is to tell them about your faith. Don't feed them, don't clothe them. That's not so important. So again, I don't want to diss it, but that's where that all. So listen to most television evangelists. You'll see a strong, strong emphasis on John and Paul. Steve.
More a comment than a question, and probably a mirror.
Then get up here. Get up, because I'm going to say it's a comment. Get up here. They want to. I'm not going to repeat your comment. Get up here. Come on. Okay.
I'll just turn the camera you're in. Okay, there we go. You're on camera.
I am struck between John and Paul how much kind of digging at Peter there is in the Bible when you really start reading into it.
Yes.
I think I find comfort in that what we experience today, not only within Catholicism, but Protestantism and evangelicalism, it seems to me that was present, from year 2. And is that an accurate, I guess the question I would have, is that an accurate way to read this?
That's surely one way to read it. There's more going on than that. But yes, the tensions. Remember how, in all of Paul's letters, he's always worried about unity. Go back. It's in every letter. Paul didn't say, and don't drive your chariots too fast, because he would only talk about things that were problems. Speeding was not a problem in the first century. Unity, big problem in the church from the very beginning. Wait till we get to the end of John. What is Jesus' big prayer at the end of the Last Supper scene? It's a whole chapter about unity. A real question now? Yes.
In the wedding feast at Cana.
Yes. We're not there yet, but why don't you hold that? We're going to get there after our break. Any burning question, though, that you're going to forget? Yes.
So, I like the map part.
You like the map?
I like the map. I like to know where this takes place. So, why are they ragging at Nazareth?
Why are they ragging? Because Nazareth is it's like Weston. It's a nowhere. It's like nowhere, Or might say Mosinee. Better yet, Mosinee. You don't expect big figures to come from backward villages. In that culture, you know, where'd you go to college? I went to Terrible. Versus, I went to Harvard, you know? I mean, it's the same, you know, that's what, it's about name, the importance of a name, and you from the wrong place, wrong side of the tracks. It's just an ordinary town. Okay? Okay, time for a break. Take a break, and we'll come back and do more of this, okay? All right. How is the